My younger brother and I are the children of high-ranking officials. Since he was a child, my brother has been obsessed with fighting me for the position of heir, as if stealing the love of our parents wasn't enough. He also took my girlfriend, Willow, away from me. But that's not all. In order to cut the root of the problem, he personally drove a big truck and rammed me, sending me flying about 300 meters. However, before I could even hit the ground, the next moment, I found myself reborn on the day of my 14th birthday. At that moment, I was making a wish with my eyes closed. When I opened my eyes again, I was shocked to see my mom move to block me, telling my brother to blow out my candles for me, just as my mom was about to urge me to be the older brother and give way to my younger brother. No one expected this. I jumped up and threw the cake in my brother's face. I yelled, "Let you blow them out. Are you never going to live to see your own birthday?" Before my brother could start crying, I threw myself to the ground. Acting crazy, I crawled across the floor in a dark, twisted manner, grabbing my hair wildly, screaming, crying, doing push-ups, walking back and forth, howling like a ghost. My parents were stunned. Chapter 1. My name is George, and I've been reborn at the age of 14. To summarize my past life in a few words: big victim. Before I was 10, I was a left-behind child. My parents worked in the city, while I lived in the countryside with my grandparents. They were old and wanted to enjoy their retirement, so they didn't think much of me. In those days, when I had no one to love or care for me, I kept telling myself that only kindness would earn love, and that if I repaid resentment with kindness, I would earn respect from others. So, I often hurt myself to benefit others. When I was 10, my parents brought me to the city and suddenly I found out that I had an 8-year-old brother. The next few years of my absurd life taught me one thing: endure for a moment and things will seem peaceful. But take a step back and people will take advantage of you. No one respects someone who doesn't even respect themselves. Chapter 2. Of course, the aftermath of smashing the cake was my dad grabbing me and giving me a slap across the face. Then, he gave me a proper beating. As I was being hit, I cried and wailed, venting all the humiliation I had suffered until now. I shouted, "You're biased toward my brother. The three of you are the real family. If that's the case, why didn't you just strangle me at birth? Go ahead and beat me to death. If you kill me, you'll go to jail, and in my next life, I'll be your father. Then, I'll be biased too, and I'll make sure you never even get the chance to exist." My dad was so furious that he looked like a demon, veins bulging on his forehead. My mom looked at me with disappointment and frowned. "How did you turn out like this?" Hilarious. She had always looked at me with disappointment. I had grown immune to it. I even gave her a smile that said, "I'll do it again next time." The next day, I deliberately wore a thick coat to school. It was autumn, and my classmates were all wearing long-sleeved shirts, but I wrapped myself in a winter jacket, sweating profusely in class. My homeroom teacher walked up to me and told me to take off my coat. Watching me sweat so much was making her uncomfortable. I sniffled softly, pretending to be deeply aggrieved, and slowly took off my coat, revealing my arms covered in bruises. The teacher called the police immediately. I swore I would study hard and repay my teacher's kindness. To be honest, it was divine intervention. My dad was a government official, a man who cared a lot about his public image, so I wasn't worried in the slightest that he would abandon me, and he probably wouldn't dare beat me to death either. All I wanted was fairness. Since no one was going to give it to me, I would take it myself. On the weekend, my mom took my brother to the mall while I was locked up at home. Before leaving, she told me to reflect on all the inhuman things I had done recently. She said, "Your dad is a deputy director now, and this is a crucial time for his promotion. Do you realize you might become a stain on his record? If I had known you'd turn out like this, I wouldn't have given birth to you at all." My mom spoke with a look of utter disgust. My brother hid behind her, making faces at me. I sat in my room for a while and suddenly remembered. In my past life, I had been a child everyone praised as obedient. They fed on me, drained my blood, devoured my flesh, took everything from me, and then told me, "You are such a good child." So, is that it? A child who doesn't make a fuss doesn't get any candy. If that's the case, then I won't just make a fuss. I'll crawl in the dark, pull my hair, pick my nose, dig at my eyeballs, climb a tree, scream like a monkey, jump into the water, and shriek at the top of my lungs. Chapter 3. I tore down my window curtain, cut it into strips, and tied them together. One end was secured to the windowsill, and the other was tied around my body. My family lived on the 3rd floor, not too high, but standing on the windowsill still made me dizzy for a second. I carefully stepped out with one foot. Immediately, I heard screams from below. "Kid, what are you doing? That's too dangerous. Get back inside." This was the government compound, the place where I had grown up, and today, George, was going to make sure my whole family lost their dignity. I let the rope slip down little by little. Just as the panicked onlookers were about to call the police, I had already landed safely. The people watching me were frantic, but I simply said, "Don't worry, everyone. I've just been locked up at home for too long. I'm just stepping out to get some fresh air." I forced a brave smile. Although my family lived in the government compound, my parents actually owned multiple properties, mansions, luxury apartments, you name it. And that brings us to my complicated family background. My father was a golden phoenix who had flown out of the countryside, the only college graduate from his village in his generation. After graduating, he landed a government job and climbed the ranks for over a decade. Now, he was the second in command at his bureau. But my father wanted both power and wealth, so he had my mother quit her job and run a business under her name. His political career kept advancing, and the money kept pouring in. Unfortunately, he ended up with a son like me. What bad luck. Heh. The people in the compound respected my dad, so they didn't make a big fuss over my little stunt. But behind closed doors, they were all gossiping. And my dad, he gave me another brutal beating. This time, he really went all out, hitting me as if he wanted me dead. Halfway through, I suddenly muttered, "Dad, have you even eaten today?" He froze. Then, his face turned beet red. Like an enraged bull, he charged at me again. I quickly dodged and dashed toward the window, throwing it open and shouting, "Help! Domestic violence! My dad is going to beat me to death." My mom panicked and yanked me back, covering my mouth before slamming the window shut. I grinned and said, "Go ahead and kill me. Tomorrow, you'll be on the front page, and I'll be 6 feet under. I've already thought of the perfect headline for you. Shocking. Deputy Director of Bureau caught driving his own son to death, a story of morality and human depravity." My dad was smart. If he weren't, he wouldn't have been the only one from his village to make it into college. He forced himself to calm down and plopped onto the sofa. Then, he asked, "All right, what do you want? You wouldn't be making such a scene if you didn't have a demand." He lit a cigarette. I said, "Put the cigarette out." His hand trembled slightly. "You little brat, do you think?" I cut him off. "Think carefully before you speak." I folded my arms and looked down at him. He gritted his teeth and threatened, "Do you believe I won't send you to a mental hospital?" I let out a cold chuckle. Deputy Director Wong, raising a lunatic for a son. A dragon begets a dragon. A phoenix begets a phoenix. If I'm a madman, what does that make you? He stubbed out his cigarette in the ashtray and said, "You don't have to be my son." I looked at him as if he were an idiot. "Seriously, you're willing to raise someone else's kid just like that?" He paused for a moment. Then, he lowered his head and fell silent. I smirked. "Paul, you have to understand, I'm not exactly thrilled to be your son either. So, how about we make a deal?" Chapter 4. At the age of 15, I finally managed to transform into the bully everyone in my family feared. Sometimes, when my brother snatched things from me, my mom would take them back and toss them to me, saying, "Why are you taking his things? Do you want me to buy them for you?" There was no love, but there was no harm either. That was enough. One evening, Makoto said to me, "Bro, I really pity you. What's the point of defying mom and dad? You won't get a single cent of the family inheritance." I kept my eyes on the book, choosing to ignore him, but he just couldn't stop gloating. He laughed. "George, what are you pretending for? Mom, Dad, and I are a family of 3. This home will never welcome you. If you're smart, you'll leave when you're an adult. I might even convince Mom and Dad to give you a few thousand." I threw the book at him, hitting him square on the forehead. I shouted, "Brother," I cried out with a broken heart, "why are you hitting yourself with the book on your head? If I've really done something wrong, then may heaven punish me, but don't hurt my innocent little brother." This morning, I only had soy milk for breakfast, not even a bite of meat. "Doing good deeds," I yelled, then started banging my head on the floor in a strange way, crawling, picking my nose, and rubbing it on my brother. I cried, "Brother, how could I live without you?" Makoto screamed, "No, don't come any closer." Chapter 5. After the middle school entrance exams, I got into the best high school in the city. My dad wanted to throw me an entrance celebration banquet, but I immediately flipped the table. I said, "Don't bother." Short and to the point. Last time, he invited his leaders and business partners, throwing a grand party. Then, he made me toast each and every leader or business partner who had helped him with liquor. At just 15, I ended up vomiting non-stop, and it took me weeks to recover. This time, he thought I would lick up to those leaders. Dream on. My dad's lips trembled, and he said, "Fine, we won't have it. Just don't lose your mind." I returned him a cold, sinister smile and started packing my things. My parents exchanged a glance, then suddenly became overly considerate, packing my stuff for me. They said, "Are you going to board school? Do you need anything? We'll buy it for you." I looked at them, confused, and said, "Boarding school? I already donated all my middle school stuff." My dad asked, "Donated what?" "Organize your notes. I'll give them to Section Chief Cheng's son. He's taking the exams next year." I forced a smile and replied, You really know how to handle things. But I didn't refuse. Even though I had been hit earlier, I still remembered he was my dad, and in my own way, I appreciated that he cared, somewhat. I said, I've packed them up already. Here, take them. Send them over. I handed him a set of beautifully organized study notes. The handwriting was neat, and everything was well organized. My dad was ecstatic, his nostrils flaring as he gasped with excitement. He said, "You're such a good son. It was worth all the pain. Your mom. Hurry up and buy some nice clothes for him. We can't let him look too shabby when he starts high school." He puffed up with pride, looking like a rooster that had just won a fight. I slipped a few notes between the pages of the study material, my dad's personal story, the tale of a man who had crawled out of a rural village and changed his fate. I hoped it could give hope and direction to kids in mountainous regions. To be fair, my dad was a bit inspirational. In my past life, I also entered this top school, but I was barely scraping by. This time, my grades were good, and I made it into the best class. On the first day of school, my dad couldn't keep up his low-profile act. He drove me to registration in our best car. He strutted in, wanting everyone to know that his son had entered as the top student in the district. As I stepped into class, I suddenly remembered that Willow was in this class. Willow was Makoto's childhood friend, well, more his friend than mine. She had been my girlfriend in my past life, and also the one who betrayed me most. I arrived a little late, and there were only 2 empty seats left, one by the trash can and one next to Willow. I chose to sit by the trash can. After all, trash belongs in the trash, and Willow was placed on display for all to see. "Hi, I'm your new desk partner," I said cheerfully to the girl next to me. She didn't even glance at me, coldly lifting her head to look out the window. I tidied up my desk, then took out my books and began wrapping them with book covers. In my past life, I was careless with my studies. My books and papers were all tattered. This time, I was determined to be a good student. It started with respecting the books. When you respect them, they'll respect you in return. So, I wrapped them tightly and carefully flipped through them. But the next second, I heard a haughty voice from the girl beside me. "Humph, you really know how to act. What do you think this is? An antique?" I was speechless. Chapter 6. The first class was homeroom, and the teacher asked everyone to introduce themselves, starting from the first row, along with their hobbies. I thought for a moment. I wanted to say, "My name is George, and my hobby is going crazy," but no, that would be too flashy. I came here to study, not to attract attention. To my surprise, my female desk partner stood up, flipped her long hair, and said, "Hi everyone, my name is Anna. I'm the chosen one of magic. My right eye holds the power of magic, and my dream is to become the queen of the night." I was stunned. Boom. The class erupted. In the next second, I stood up and said, "My name is George, and my dream is to become my dad's father." The class was shocked. Right after that, someone else chimed in. "My name is Maria, and my dream is to become a slipper, the one my mom hits me with." "My name is Susan, and my dream is to become a princess," with Anna's wild imagination leading the way. Whatever nonsense we said afterward seemed trivial by comparison. When it was Willow's turn, her voice was gentle, with a slight smile as she said, "My name is Willow, and my dream is to open a small store and take care of lots of stray cats and dogs." I was a bit surprised. I didn't expect her to have such a dream. Thanks to Anna, the Chunibu girl teenage angst, our class got along quite well. That day would remain in our memories, shining like stars in the sky. In the blink of an eye, I was in my senior year of high school. Over these 2 years, Willow and I had kept a tacit distance. She was a reserved and introverted person. In my past life, we had been ambiguous for 2 years, and it wasn't until my senior year that I mustered the courage to confess to her, and we finally got together. But only a few days later, Makoto inserted himself into our relationship, and it became a trio, relying on my easygoing nature, and with my parents constantly reminding me, I became practically Makoto's servant, and I always felt that as the older brother, it was my responsibility to take care of him. Somehow, I developed a strange sense of duty, though looking back, taking care of Makoto was never really my responsibility. I was just a kid myself. The past is too painful to recall. In this life, I want nothing to do with either of them. All I cared about was studying. Whoever disturbed my studies, I would bite back. Coincidentally, in these 3 years, I always sat next to Anna. She was the strangest girl I'd ever met. During class, she would rest her chin in her hand, gazing out the window, lost in thought. During study periods, she would pass notes to the person in front of her, gossiping about which boy from which class was the most handsome. After class, she would act up again. Anna would shout, "Ah, it hurts. My right arm hurts so much. Is the magic seal about to be broken? Let me try." Magic girl awakening. Transformation. I was speechless. I was extremely speechless. She had probably gotten numb from holding that pose for too long. I asked in confusion, "Anna, why is it that a Chunibu girl like you studies so well, You're always ranked first in every exam. She rolled her eyes and said, What Chinibu? Don't spread rumors and ruin my image as a cold, goddess-like figure. I was speechless. When I ignored her, she leaned in again and said, Above science, there is magic. If you don't master science, how can you delve into the magical world? I stared at her, completely confused, and asked, What magical world are you trying to explore? Anna lowered her gaze, her cheeks turning pink, and whispered, For example, is love just the eruption of hormones, or is it the attraction of some unknown magical force? Chapter 7. Since I didn't want to waste time commuting between school and home, I started staying at the dorms in my senior year. If I could, I would have even slept in the classroom. My brain just isn't that smart, and even with all the effort and buffs from 2 lifetimes, I could barely stay in the top 5 of my class. In this elite class, there are those who are both smart and hardworking, and there are those who don't study at all but still come in first place, the so-called geniuses. But most of us are like me, average talent, putting in all our effort to keep up. It was a rare weekend, and I planned to head home. First, I needed to throw my dirty clothes and socks in the washing machine. Second, I needed to go home to let off some steam and relax. Driving at 70 miles per hour, I was in a good mood. The first person I saw when I got home was Makoto, sitting on the couch watching TV. He glanced at me and said, Long time no see. I couldn't be bothered to waste words with him. He wasn't worth it, acting like a vegetable. If I scolded him, he probably wouldn't even react. He continued, Mom and Dad are out. Makoto said this with a grin. What a pity. When I got to my room, I noticed there were a lot of things that didn't belong to me. There were Makoto's comic books in my bookshelf, his pillow and blankets on my bed, and his scattered clothes all over the place. On the desk was his game console. Seriously, at this moment, I really wanted to poop on his bed and let him experience what it's like to be disgusted. But I'm a civilized person. I couldn't do that. I stormed out of my room and grabbed Makoto by the collar, slapping him twice. I gritted my teeth and said, Makoto, why do you like taking other people's stuff so much? Even pork prices are going up, and you're just getting cheaper and cheaper. Don't you know when to stop being so disgusting? Makoto yelled. Big brother, please. I won't do it again. Something wasn't right. This wasn't the kind of spoiled rich kid who would say such things, unless there was someone else around. I turned around and saw Willow, staring at me with wide, innocent eyes. Makoto, you're really something. She frowned and said, George, I didn't expect you to be like this. Willow looked at me with disappointment in her eyes. I calmly picked up my phone and dialed the number of someone saved as Source of Happiness in my contacts. Hey, Dad, Makoto brought a girl home. Makoto is dating early, I said, then quickly snapped a picture of the two of them practically glued together. I looked at Willow, my expression even more disappointed than hers, and said, Aren't you ashamed? You're just a little girl, and you're doing this with my brother. Sigh. I sighed heavily. Makoto gritted his teeth and said, What nonsense are you talking? Willow and I are innocent, I said. Then swear it. Swear that if you're really with Willow, you'll never have peace. I kept stoking the flames. After all, I'm a madman, and anything a madman says is normal. Of course, Makoto didn't dare swear. He stood there, completely speechless. Willow frowned and said, George, you don't need to be so aggressive. After all these years, you've really changed. The boy who was once approachable and gentle. I'll just pretend I never knew him. I lowered my head and took 3 seconds to mourn for my pitiful past life. Then I turned and left. Arguing with them was pointless, and it's not healthy to debate with 2 people at once. It causes mental exhaustion. But my room is my domain. I slammed Makoto's game console and notebook, then tore up his blankets. I said, If your stuff ever enters my room again, this will be its fate. And that goes for you, too. I threw the torn pieces out of my room. That night, I didn't return to school. I stayed home, not for any special reason, just to wait for my dear parents. At 6 o'clock, they came back, holding plenty of shopping bags. Obviously from a trip to the mall. Makoto rushed out of his room, acting very considerate, and took all the shopping bags. I sat at the dining table, watching my somewhat embarrassed mom and said, What are you standing around for? Go cook. My dad, seemingly a little scared, took a step back. I gestured to him with my head and said, You're not off the hook either. Go slice some fruit for me. After a pause, I continued, By the way, Makoto, I heard from your homeroom teacher that you were near the bottom of your class in the recent monthly exam. What's going on? Did you start dating and became a simp? Makoto glared at me with anger, but he didn't dare move with the 2 slap marks on his face. I said, Go ahead and bring the things Mom and Dad bought you to my room. I'll try them out first, I shamelessly added. He gritted his teeth and said, Those are for me from Mom and Dad. I sighed and said, How can you be so inconsiderate? I'm older than you. Good things should come to me first. Don't you understand? The eldest brother is like a father. Right, Director Wong. Is this how you educate your son? My dad hesitated but finally said, "Give it to him. I'll buy you new things tomorrow," I replied. "Send me the new stuff too. Have it shipped to school." Chapter 8. The next day, I slept in for the first time in ages. When I woke up, I found the house empty. Mom had gone to the office, and Dad had dropped Makoto off at school before heading to work himself. I opened the fridge, only to find it completely empty. I looked at myself in the mirror and muttered, "Forget it. I'm used to it." As I opened the door, I suddenly saw a car parked not far away. Anna poked her head out from the window and cheerfully shouted, "George, are you off to school?" Perhaps because the sunlight was too harsh, my eyes started to sting. Anna stopped me from putting my suitcase down, saying she needed to test something. She said, "This morning, I woke up and my scalp was itching like I was growing a brain. I have a feeling I've evolved. Maybe I can move things with my mind now." She refused help from the driver and me, easily lifting the suitcase herself and placing it in the car. She looked at me with sparkling eyes. "See, I told you. I didn't even use any strength. That big suitcase, all moved with telekinesis." I didn't feel like responding. The suitcase was empty, just a shell. She then asked, "Hey, have you had breakfast?" I shook my head. With her sparkling eyes again, she asked, "Then how about trying this magic wrap?" She looked at me eagerly. I was so hungry. I grabbed the wrap and took a big bite. She stared at me in surprise and said, "You can do magic too. Why did it disappear right after you took it?" I didn't know what to say, so I ignored her. The wrap was delicious, warm, and if I could, I would have asked for more. Then, in the next second, I accidentally let out a loud fart. A strange smell filled the air. Anna looked at me curiously and asked, "You're here to shit, right?" The driver in the front seat suddenly coughed loudly and dryly said, "Young lady, if we can't have a proper conversation, let's not talk at all." The college entrance exams were drawing near, and I stayed at school, not going home for weekends. I spent all my time drilling through practice questions. Anna also applied to stay at the school, and the Chinibu girl finally seemed to be getting serious about her studies. The atmosphere in the class was tense. As the top school in the city, the best class, everyone was pushing themselves to surpass others. The countdown to the exam was just one day. I checked into a hotel. Anna was picked up by her family, but in the afternoon, she came back, bringing her whole family to stay in the suite next to mine. During dinner, we bumped into each other, and she called out cheerfully, "What a coincidence, George." On the first day of the exam, I opened the door and saw Anna grinning at me. She winked and said, "Did you bring your ID and exam ticket? Let's go together." Chapter 9. After the college entrance exam, I felt like I did well, but now I was about to turn 18, and my family no longer had the obligation to support me. It was time for me to find a way to support myself. I planned to work a summer job, maybe do some tutoring to earn money. Coincidentally, a publishing house contacted me, saying they wanted to buy my notes from the past 3 years of high school to publish them as a study guide. It was a decent amount of money, and if I saved carefully, it could even cover my university tuition. The editor mentioned they had originally contacted our school's campus beauty, Anna, but she told them she had magically recorded everything and didn't have any notes, so she recommended me instead. Such a benefactor. After the exams, I stayed at home, eating and drinking, waiting for my adulthood. In my previous life, my coming-of-age ceremony had been an utter disaster. My dad threw a grand banquet for me, inviting local dignitaries and powerful figures from the political and business world. During the banquet, my dad made me toast everyone, from the highest ranking to the lowest, from the oldest to the youngest. Some kind-hearted people advised my dad, saying, "Don't make him drink too much, he's just a kid." My dad smiled widely and replied, "What's there to be afraid of? He's an adult now, a real man. How can he not drink?" I started to feel dizzy from the alcohol and instinctively looked for Willow. She was surrounded by a group of rich second-generation kids, with Makoto standing next to her. They were all laughing. One rich kid, with a mischievous grin, asked her, "Willow, describe your boyfriend in 3 words." Willow, as if she had lost a game of truth or dare, pouted and waved her hand, saying, "Black, short, strong." I was speechless. The rich kid leered and asked, "Where's he black? Where's he short? In what way is he strong?" "His skin's dark, he's short, and his wrist is strong." Chapter 10. When the exam results came out, I received a call from the top school in the province, ranking 9th overall. The class chat had already exploded. The top spot, naturally, went to the Chinibu girl, Anna. But as the dark horse of the year, I had claimed 2nd place in the class and 9th in the province. Our class teacher went wild in the chat, posting non-stop, "If you put in the effort, it really pays off." The teacher wrote a small essay in the group. I was honestly a bit worried about George's mental state. He seemed obsessed, and I didn't dare to intervene. Thankfully, it all turned out well. 2 of our class made it into the provincial top 10, and I'm going down in history. The teacher asked in the group, Do you think the school will make a plaque for me or even a statue? What pose should I strike? Honestly, the one who should be worried about their mental state was him. While everyone was congratulating Anna for ranking first in the province, Anna, being her usual self, arrogantly said, "We should congratulate George instead." As a mere mortal, I would call him the strongest. It seemed Anna had gotten some special membership or red and blue diamonds. As her messages were always accompanied by flashy effects, she managed to shift everyone's focus onto me. I quickly messaged her privately, "Shut up, Anna." Anna sent a rolling eyes emoji and replied, "Mortal, come down here, come down." I instinctively glanced down toward our building. A car was parked downstairs. I hurried downstairs, but my parents stopped me. My dad asked, "Where are you going, son?" I casually replied, "To the crematorium." My parents' faces immediately darkened. "Why to the crematorium?" I answered, "To bury my lost youth." My dad rubbed his hands together. "It's too late. It's not safe to go there. You're a student at a top university now. Let me drive you." I widened my eyes and clapped my hands dramatically. "Oh my God, my Holy Mary, can I ride in your prestigious car?" "No way. No way. That's Makoto's exclusive ride. I'm afraid I might get hemorrhoids if I sit there." Good heavens. I've never even ridden in my own father's car. My dad turned pale. I bypassed him and ran downstairs. Anna was waiting for me downstairs, and she anxiously asked about my college applications. I shrugged and said, "I'm going with the flow. I haven't decided what I want to study yet." At an age when I had nothing, it was irrational to decide on a lifelong path based solely on test scores. I asked, "What about you? What are you planning to study?" Anna bit her lip and replied, "You know, my family's in the capital and in business. My dad wants me to help my older brother or my future in-laws, so he wants me to study finance or management." I patted her head and said with a smile, "You seem to have grown up suddenly." She gave me a serious look and said, "Don't touch my head. Only husbands are allowed to do that." Then, she rubbed her hair against my fingers. I quickly withdrew my hand, trying to cover up the awkwardness. "So, what do you want to study?" Anna fell into deep thought. "I want to study medicine, to explore the miracles of the human body." I nodded. "Okay, decided. I'll study medicine." Anna panicked, her cheeks turning red. Why you? What do you mean? You don't have to do this because of me." I chuckled. "I think I'm pretty suited for studying medicine. It fits my personality." I made my decision. If I didn't go crazy, I'd be perfectly normal. It seemed like a good fit for me. Chapter 11. My parents started to show me a lot of attention, but I had already outgrown that phase. My dad said, "Well, tomorrow you'll be an adult. I feel like I've failed you a bit over the years. How about I throw you a grand coming-of-age party? We can call it even on all our father-son grievances." I replied, "No, thanks." He didn't expect me to be so resistant. He said, "I'm doing this for your own good. George, you don't think that just because you've gotten into college, your life is going to be smooth sailing, do you?" My dad relaxed and sat down on the sofa. He continued, "There was a time I thought that if I got into university, I could change my fate, but the college entrance exam is just an insignificant starting point in life." They called me a phoenixman and a toad, but I studied like crazy, thinking I could reach Rome. I didn't realize that some people are born in Rome. Even if I got there, I'd still be one of the lowest. "You think you can leave me behind and have dignity and respect?" His eyes were full of mockery, like he had figured out the rules of the world. But to me, his words were nothing but old cliches. I remained calm and said, "You helped me. What exactly did you help me with?" "Help me become one of the lowest in Rome too, and just be at other people's disposal." Paul lit a cigarette and said, "No, you can stand on my shoulders and see the world. After all, you're my only son." I froze. What did he mean by that? He said, "Makoto is adopted. His father was an old colleague of mine. Do you know how much adopting him has benefited me? Everyone praises me as someone who values loyalty, and my career has gone smoothly beyond belief." Paul took a drag, and in the swirling smoke, I could barely see his face. I scoffed, "You're pathetic." I left without saying another word. Pathetic. Really pathetic. I thought Paul was just biased toward my brother, but he was even more despicable than I imagined. Everyone called me crazy, but it was clear he was the crazy one. In my past life, he had indulged Makoto without any boundaries, raising him into the arrogant person he was. When Makoto found out I was with Willow, he started sabotaging me, and Willow, with her so-called kind heart, was nothing more than a saint-like figure, easily manipulated. Makoto feigned a terminal illness and tricked her into becoming his girlfriend. I, betrayed by both my brother and my girlfriend, failed the college entrance exam and ended up at a regular university. I told myself to stay away from both of them, as far as possible, but Makoto kept showing off, deliberately trying to hurt me. At 18, just having become an adult, I had never been treated kindly. How could I possibly know how to treat myself with kindness? I fell into depression, but I didn't give up hope. I cooperated with the treatment, until one day, Willow came to me, holding my medical records and crying. She choked up and said, "I'm so sorry. I didn't realize how much I'd hurt you." Look at her, always the picture of a saint, always so soft-hearted. It was almost sickening. Willow broke up with Makoto, and then Makoto went mad. He personally drove a car and killed me. The last image I saw before I was reborn was Makoto's crazed, malicious smile. Chapter 12. The coming-of-age ceremony was held as planned. Paul thought I had given in. He was certain that as his son, I should be like him, ruthless and ready to climb to the top by any means. Unfortunately, I was never like that. Almost all the local elites were in attendance. Anna's family was from the capital, so they weren't on the guest list. However, as my friend, I did send her an invitation. Paul was all about the bottom line and allowed me to invite only 2 people. The rest of the spots were reserved for his own connections. After some pleasantries, Paul stepped up to the stage and said, "Welcome, everyone, to my son's coming-of-age ceremony. Actually, today is also his graduation celebration." A round of praise echoed from the crowd. Vice Director Wang really knows how to raise a child. Such excellent academic performance. Paul nodded at me, signaling me to come up and say a few words. I mouthed back at him, "Go to hell." He gritted his teeth and said, "I hope you all eat and drink well." He thought he could make me compromise, but that was impossible. George, would never compromise. A few days ago, I pretended to be meek to trick him into letting me transfer my household registration to the school. Now that I had gotten what I wanted, Paul couldn't touch me anymore. I wandered around the venue, grabbing a bite to eat. But when I turned around, I saw Anna standing in front of me, wearing an ice blue satin gown. Her makeup was flawless, her figure tall and slender, radiating a soft, luminous aura. She caught me off guard, leaving me speechless. After a long pause, I finally managed to say, You look amazing today." Anna lowered her head, nervously tugging at the hem of her skirt and softly replied, "Thank you. You look great too." I said, "Don't pull at it. Your dress will wrinkle." We stared at each other. For a moment, I was transported back to the first time we met. She had looked at me with a cold sneer and said, "You really can pretend. Do you think you're some antique painting?" Her slightly immature face then and her face today overlapped, and I realized we had known each other for 3 years now. Back then, she wore a ponytail, I had a buzz cut, and we both bundled ourselves up in oversized school uniforms. Now, my hair was neat, her makeup flawless, both of us wrapped in the elegant exterior of adulthood, yet looking at each other with the same pure eyes as before. Anna lowered her gaze and quietly said, "Tomorrow, I'm leaving, going back to the capital." She paused, then cautiously asked, "Would you like to come with me? You can take a look at the school and stuff." I immediately replied, "Sure, I'll make the world my home. I'll go wherever I want." Her eyes sparkled, and she said, "It's a deal then. I'll come find you tomorrow, and from now on, you have to take care of me. No, I mean, you have to look after me more." A mischievous thought crossed my mind, and I leaned closer, asking, "How do you want me to take care of you?" Anna's face flushed red, and beneath her fitted dress, her long legs were barely visible. She replied, "Give me money, and you can support me." I pretended to sigh in disappointment, saying, "So, taking care of you means hiring me to work for you. Good thing I didn't confess, or this would be so awkward." Anna's face turned bright red, and she hurriedly said, "Hurry up and confess. It's not a work relationship." I poked her cheek and asked, "Then, Miss Anna, would you like to be my girlfriend?" She eagerly threw herself into my arms and replied, "I will." Some are happy, some are sad. On one side, Anna's eyes sparkled at me like they could string the air together, while on the other side, Makoto was kneeling in the corridor outside the banquet hall, confessing to Willow, "I really like you. Willow, will you be my girlfriend?" Seeing Willow remain silent, he even began to shed tears. Willow, with a pout, helplessly said, "Makoto, I only see you as a good friend." Chapter 13. After the banquet, I went home to pack. Besides 2 sets of personal clothing, I took nothing. Everything I had used or eaten at the Wang family's house, I would pay back in the future. I opened the door, and in the dim moonlight, I saw Makoto sitting on the couch, flipping coins. The coins scattered all over the floor, none of them caught, not even bothering to turn on the lights to do this. Really typical of him. He spoke, his voice like a ghost's, startling me. "You think you're so proud, huh?" He continued. "You must have known by now. I'm not your parents' real son." "So what, George? I've enjoyed the family love that should have been yours for so many years. Are you jealous of me?" I warned. "If you're sick, don't come and show it in front of me." He laughed. "Oh, by the way, George, do you know what Willow says about you?" "Haha, she says you're black, little, strong." Makoto stood up, provoking me. "Everything you have will eventually be mine. Your real parents don't want you, so why would Willow?" I grabbed my suitcase and said, "Ah, right. It's all yours. Take it all. Oh, and you wanted to put your stuff in my room. Right. Go ahead. Put whatever you want in there. Then, without a second glance, I left. I didn't want to spend another second in this house. Makoto screamed. George, you better die outside and never come back. I turned around and said, Makoto, you're really pathetic. The response I got was a fruit knife thrown in my direction in a wild rage. He probably didn't even realize how accurate he was. It landed straight in my chest. I collapsed to the ground. When I opened my eyes again, I was in the hospital, with my mom sitting by my bedside. I quickly touched my chest. No wound. I remembered, I had put my word book in the chest pocket of my shirt. After so many years of studying, I had gotten used to carrying it there. I had even planned to continue competing in English at university. See, I told you, respect books, and they'll respect you back. George, you're awake. My mom rushed to me, looking anxious. Quick, I'll get you some paper and a pen. You write a letter of forgiveness for Makoto. Your dad sent him to the police station. And there you have it, my mom. I said flatly, sure, I'll write a letter of forgiveness. You can write a severance agreement. My mom shouted, you're so selfish. You weren't even hurt. It was your brother. I didn't respond, just laid back down. She yanked at my blanket, trying to get me to sit up, though it was embarrassing. I was probably just too scared and fainted. Who wouldn't be afraid seeing a knife stuck in their chest? She said, George, I've raised you for 8 years. Is this how you repay me? You're a white-eyed wolf. I suddenly shot up, shaking my head like a maniac, shouting, I'm not listening. I'm not listening. You're not my mom. No real mom would act this way after her son nearly gets killed. You're Makoto's mom. Dad said Makoto was adopted. But actually, I'm the adopted one. Right. I was losing it. She retorted. You're talking nonsense. Makoto isn't adopted. He isn't. He's my real son. Since I was young, I put him in the countryside. And when he was 3, I brought him back. We've never been apart. He's my only son. I froze. Was she out of her mind? What kind of twisted things had she done? Chapter 14. The next day, I was discharged from the hospital, and Makoto was brought back home as well. He had become quieter, and so had I. Paul went to work, and it was just the two of them at home. I grabbed my suitcase and waved at them. Goodbye. No, say bye because I never wanted to see them again. I walked out the door, and the sun was shining brightly. Anna stuck her head out of the car window and winked at me, waiting for me. My future, the one that truly belonged to me, was still ahead. Extra 1, Makoto. When did I realize it? It was when I was 6 years old. I noticed that I didn't look like my parents. Some people said I wasn't their biological child. They looked at me with pity, saying that my father was a subordinate of my real father, and that I was adopted. My dad always looked at me from above, filled with compassion, while my mom gave me all her love, but she would look past me, always staring at someone else. When she looked at me, she would zone out and call me George. Later, she rarely mentioned George anymore. When she looked at me, all I saw was love. When I was 8, the real George came back. He was very dark, very thin, small, with cracked lips and rough hands. I was so much better than him. My parents must have loved me more. Yeah, all the best food and the fun things were mine. Whenever I wanted something, I would see George helplessly give it to me. George was unnecessary. This family didn't welcome him. I don't know when exactly, but the thought took root deep inside me. Mom spent more and more time looking at him, and Dad's gaze at him was filled with something almost like fireworks. George's personality was weak, easy to bully. When I turned 12, George suddenly changed, like a madman. I gloatingly watched him get beaten, his body covered in wounds, thinking to myself, the harder they beat him, the better. Kill him. I don't want this brother. But Dad didn't. Later, George got into a top university, and he was finally leaving. But why did he have to go to the same school as my goddess, the girl I'd liked since childhood? At George's coming-of-age ceremony, I confessed to Willow. She replied, I like boys who are good at studying. I said, I will study hard. Will you be my girlfriend? I will work even harder. She shook her head and said, I only see you as a good friend. I asked if she liked George. She said yes. She said she liked how hardworking George was, how serious he was, how he expressed himself. I immediately started to play the victim, forcing out a few tears. I knew Willow was a bit of a white lotus, as long as I showed her how pitiful I was. She'd give in to my request, but she pushed me away with disgust on her face and said, I used to think that one should be kind. I thought George and I were the same, people who aren't good at arguing, always pleasing others, so always suffering. But later, he showed me a radiant light, and I wanted to become like him. When I got home, I lost control. I threw whatever I had in my hand at George. I forgot I was holding a fruit knife. Luckily, George was fine. I hated him, but I didn't want him dead as long as he didn't steal my things. The next day, George left, dragging his suitcase behind him. Dad said to me, Once you're of age, you can leave too. His gaze at me was like he was looking at filth. Overnight, I lost everything. For the rest of my life, I never saw George again. At 18, I didn't get into university and was kicked out by my family. That's when I finally understood the hardships of life. Years later, I realized it was as if I had been the one stealing George's things. Those things were always his. And I was the thief. Extra 2, Makoto's mother. My name is Sophia, a girl who worked hard to get into college and became a teacher. Hoping to change my fate, when I was 23, I met Paul, someone who, like me, had worked his way up. We got together, and had a healthy, chubby boy. Paul asked me to quit my job, but I refused. I knew how hard I had worked for my position. I could give up my life, but not my job. I wanted to hire a maternity nurse, but Paul refused. He said, as just a clerk, with so many eyes on him, how could he afford to hire someone? So, we sent our son to the countryside. The day we left, my son cried so much, it broke my heart, but I didn't look back. When he grew up, he would understand how much the success of his parents would benefit him. But what I didn't expect was that Paul brought home a baby, saying it was his colleague's child. His colleague and his wife had died in a car accident, leaving only the baby. Paul decided to adopt the child. I disagreed. I hadn't even raised my own son, so why should I raise someone else's? But this time, Paul gave me a satisfactory condition. He said he wanted to start a company, but his identity was special, so he wanted me to quit my job and take on a position in the company. I didn't understand all the intricacies, but I knew he wouldn't harm me, nor would he dare to. I agreed, but I insisted that we bring back our son from the countryside. He refused again. He said, now that we had just adopted the child, the public would be watching, and there couldn't be any mistakes. He said, just wait a little longer. I'll be promoted to department head soon. He held me in his arms. I looked at the baby, but my heart was full of longing and guilt for my son. Eventually, the guilt overwhelmed me. I brainwashed myself, telling myself this baby was my son, my only son, and when my real son came back, I treated him like an intruder, like a villain. In the end, I forced my own son away. He left, carrying a suitcase, and said, bye. Somehow, I knew my most precious treasure was slipping away, but I couldn't find any reason to stop him. They say, those in the thick of things are often confused. The bystanders see clearly, but when you're in the situation, you can never see what you really want. I always acted recklessly, like a broken pot. My mind was muddled. I've grown old. Every year, George sends me alimony, but he's never come back. Paul and I searched all over the capital, but we never found him. Paul and I tallied up our assets, keeping only what we needed for daily life. The rest was converted into money and sent to George, hoping he would at least meet us once. But he didn't take the money, and he didn't want us. Paul said his life had been a joke. He only wanted to climb up without scruples, so his children wouldn't have to suffer. But in the end, he lost them both. If he could do it over again, he would never have adopted Makoto. If I could do it over again, I would have treated my George well. I had so many chances to do right by him, but I missed every single one. My George. For the rest of my life, I never saw my George again. Extra 3, Anna. I live in the capital, and my parents were always busy with their business, so they didn't have time to pay attention to me. Because of that, I spent my childhood watching anime and reading novels, growing up to become a Chunibyo girl with magical powers. My parents found me too embarrassing, so they sent me to Province C for high school, a place with an excellent academic reputation. That's where I met the love of my life. On the first day of school, I bumped into a boy, free-spirited, cheerful, confident, and all around attractive to me. But, of course, Anna, the young lady, wasn't going to give my heart away so easily. I turned my head and ignored him. Then, he started carefully wrapping his textbooks, like he was a collector. I coldly said, pretending to be all serious. What, you think these are antiques or something? And he didn't respond. Under my little scheme, he and I ended up sitting together for 3 years. There was a brief period when I changed seats, and a girl sat next to me for a while. But after I bombarded her with endless chit-chat, she couldn't take it anymore and begged the teacher to switch seats. George didn't mind that I was a Chunibyo girl. He didn't mind when I kept gossiping with him, or when I slept with my head on his arm. He was really nice. But George's life wasn't easy. I knew no one ever came to his parent-teacher meetings. My parents flew all the way from the capital to attend mine, but his never came. He sat alone in his seat. I directly decided to make my mom his mom. My mom raised her eyebrows at me, then smiled at George and said, "Hey, kid, how about I come to your parent-teacher meeting? Let's practice. You can call me Mom." George looked a little dazed and hesitated, before calling out, "Mom." I was so happy I almost jumped out of the window, rolled on the ground, and climbed up onto the podium to show off. After high school graduation, I finally became George's girlfriend and came to the capital with him. My dreams had come true. And I felt so happy, so incredibly happy. The only downside was that George was in medical school, and he was so busy that I rarely saw him. It was a little unfair. And there was another thing, this woman named Willow, always dressed to the nines, running to the medical school. I felt like slapping her. I didn't get what she was thinking. That's my husband. Does she think she can be a mistress? Doesn't she have a husband of her own? Oh right, she doesn't. Willow is such a pretentious coquette. It's disgusting. George and I got married right after our undergrad. At the wedding, Willow took some unflattering photos of me. She even sent them to me, saying I looked like a chinibu when I smiled.